Hello and welcome to the Media Club. I'm your host, Matt Deegan. In the club today, when does out of London actually mean London? We look at the curious row that's dominating Scottish TV this week. Also on the programme, Wildfires across LA cause havoc for Hollywood. Rebecca Cooney, Insight Editor at Broadcast, is here to explain the effects it's had on production. All that, plus when it looked like David Montgomery had left the stage, has he got a new plaything? Karin Robinson, Senior Director of Strategy at Edelman, tells us more. That's all happening in this edition of the Media Club. Come on in. So, Rebecca, Karin, welcome back to the Media Club. Before we get into the big stories of the week, who have you picked to add to our roles? Karin, we'll start with you.
Okay, so I picked a journalist called Lila Shapiro, who this week published a huge piece of work digging deep into the allegations of sexual violence by the author Neil Gaiman. This is building on some work that had already been done by Traitors Media earlier this year. But that podcast, though it was kind of made a bit of a splash at the time, didn't really kind of land in the culture in a big way. And this week, her signature piece went out in New York Magazine. It was produced for Vulture. And it really is you're starting to see the industry respond to it in a new way. You're seeing a lot more conversation about it in culture. And although it has ruined my week because I was a fan, which was devastating, I just want to give props to Lina because it was a really fantastic piece of journalism. She took the work that Traitors had done and really dug deeper on it. She got police reports. She spoke to a lot of people around the writer. And I think it's also a really interesting media story because the magazine publication is the one that really had the impact. So, maybe there's a future for print media after all in the world of podcasts.
Yes, and there'll probably be some knock-ons to Netflix as well with that story, I imagine, too.
Absolutely. Well, Amazon is the one that has the rights to several of Neil Gaiman's. I think they've got American Gods, they've got
Good Omens
and the next Sandman series. So
yes,
she's a worthy addition to our roles. Rebecca.
So actually, we had this conversation in the lift. It turns out I also chose Lila Shapiro.
Because we normally don't reveal it to the point where people sit down. I'm glad that you chatted about it in the lift.
Yes. So I would like to echo everything Karin's just said. It's a huge story. It is heartbreaking if you are a fan of Neil Gaiman's incredible body of work and this persona that he had where he seemed like this kind of great, committed, feminist, nice guy. I think that the fact that was just a really brilliant, long feature piece I say as a feature writer, they don't always get as much attention as they should do, particularly in an age where people are just reading them off their phones. And it was just so in-depth, beautifully written, meticulously reported, and as you say, a really good kind of example of where sort of more traditional media is doing elevating stories that have appeared in newer media like podcasts. So I had a very quick...
Yes, have you come
Oh, God. So I'm going to go for Jane Featherstone.
Oh, yes,
in that she appeared before the Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee. It might have been last week, technically, but probably since you last recorded.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But she just made some really salient points and kind of communicated. This is around
sort of drama and TV
so
commissioning.
She is the chief exec of, or the head of, the boss of an indie called Sister, which produces some fantastic drama. And there's this real thing about how do we keep producing high-end drama in this country. And one of the things is we're probably going to need better tax credits, where the government sort of offers financial support for people to make stuff in this country. But she also just said a lot of really salient things about AI, because that is something that is really starting to bother the production sector at the moment, because there are so many opportunities in it and there are some dangers, and we're sort of in this limbo period where it would be nice to have some guidelines around it, and that I believe is in the pipeline. But I think that there's an anxiety around it. So I think she expressed a lot of things that the sector was worrying about. So that was my very quick, in the lift.
Well, she can definitely join to it. I'm sure AI is going to be a big topic this year. And our first story, we start this week in Scotland, where a row has blown up concerning the use of crew on Scottish shoots. Rebecca, could we call this crew traitors?
We could indeed.
What's been going on?
In that, we don't really know who they are. So, essentially, and it's been a row for a while, that there is this real move within the TV industry to produce content outside of London.
A good thing.
Yeah, really good thing. That the idea that television is made by people who live in London is how you end up with this weird idea of kind of people outside of London, rural people in different cities feel patronised, feel ignored, they don't feel represented. So it's been a real move over the last few years to get stuff produced in what's called the nations and regions. And Scotland in particular, and Scotland has Glasgow is this massive hub that's been really invested in for TV production. Now, what this row, particularly around Traitors, is that there are a lot of companies that are sort of saying, oh, yes, look at us. And the BBC has to show that it's producing a certain number of its Scottish shows for BBC Scotland in Scotland, and that it is spreading that money around the different regions.
And there's a big castle in Scotland.
There's a big castle in Scotland where people gather and stab each other in the back for our entertainment. Essentially, there's a bit of a question mark about whether or not any of those crew were actually Scottish.
Yes. So Studio Lambert Scotland is the production company.
Which is an offshoot of Studio Lambert, which is a London-based company.
Which a lot of people do.
Yeah, and it's not a terrible thing in and of itself. The idea that we... that you can live in Scotland and still work for one of the big companies that make TV shows you love is great. And we should be encouraging that. But it also means that you should be able to live in Scotland and set up your own production company and be getting work and not be penalised because you don't have a base in Scotland. And that you don't want a situation where production companies based in London with an office in Scotland, which may or may not be that big, right? And I don't want to speak to the size of Studio Lambert's Scottish team, but, there was a situation. I've heard a few people say this. I don't think it's a joke, actually. I think it's one of those things that there's a grain of truth in this, that back in the old days, you could kind of have a PO box in Scotland and call it your Scottish office. Now there are, companies with teams in Scotland, but are they just bringing crew and talent from London and just making it in Scotland? Because that's not really doing anything for the Scottish economy, the Scottish television industry. That hub in Glasgow cannot survive if nobody is getting employed and there is no local talent there and no local investment. So there is essentially, Traitors was registered as having been made at least 50% in Scotland, and it turns out actually that doesn't seem to be true. And local people in the industry have got in touch with Ofcom and said this actually isn't true. We know who's working on it, and most of them were bought from London, enough of them were bought from London that it is a problem.
I mean, Karin, is this partly because it's a complex shoot, it's all on location, there is a Scottish office for Studio Lambert, but they would be unlikely to scale a thing of this size anyway? Have they just fallen through the cracks, or is this systemic?
Well, I mean, that's the question that I think a lot of people are going to be trying to unpack. And I think, everybody's going to have their point of view. I think what's likely, from this having been revealed in the way that it has been, is there is this suspicion of things being hidden or at least misleadingly reported. We know that there were errors made, which have now been kind of discovered and corrected. I suspect that the long-term implications of that are going to be a lot more regulatory scrutiny, right? So I would expect that the government's going to be looking a lot more closely at how these rules are set up, because actually, even though these figures were misreported, it still qualifies as a Scottish shoot. So a lot of people are going to be asking right now, is that correct? Or, what were the technical rules that allowed that to happen? The problem you have as a regulator, though, is there's whatever your system is, there's always going to be a way of gaming it. So I think the intentions is here on the part of kind of how the regulations were set up and how these incentives work. As you were saying, we don't want to disincentivize people from creating Scottish offices for London-based firms. So it's always really challenging to get that right. But I think it's, unfortunately for everyone, it's probably going to cause a new round of scrutiny, interrogation, and I'm not necessarily sure we'll come out the end of it with a clear resolution.
I mean, from the BBC's perspective, in some ways, it's not their problem. And it's like, Studio Lambert needs to be 50%. If you want the series to come back, you better staff up that office. I mean, they can just say that, can't they?
They could. I don't know if they will with Traitors doing as well as it is. I think they
can get away with quite a lot.
That would depend how long the deal is.
Yeah, killing the goose that did not lay the tartan egg. I don't know. I think they're going to do that. But I do think one of the complaints that we've had, or that people I've been talking to have said, is actually a lot. The rules are just quite complicated. Yeah. Like, picking up on what Karin said, like, they are, because they are quite complex, quite labyrinthine, there is room for people to game them and to move around them, or for people to genuinely not understand them. So perhaps if there's a way to simplify those rules, that might be something the BBC needs to look at.
So when at the end credits, when it brings up the map of the UK and a little dot appears where this is where this is produced, it's like the measles now a little bit. Maybe we'll see. Okay, you'll have seen incredible destruction in LA this week as wildfires have ripped through the state. I mean, Karin, many have lost their homes, but obviously we're going to focus on the media side. And is it already impacted production in Hollywood?
It's impacted production. It's impacted the awards season. I mean, basically all of Los Angeles is either shut down or operating on different schedules. And people are trying to work very sensitively, because even where productions are continuing, there of course are a lot of people on every crew in the area who are being affected. I think it's kind of interesting to note that, although the Hollywood entertainment industry in all shapes is going to be deeply affected by this, a lot of production has already moved outside of LA anyway. So
I mean, stuff that's effective, I guess, things like Jimmy Kimmel and there's a lot of telly that sort of
a lot of kind of live ongoing telly that needs to be there, but also just the business side of entertainment is going to be deeply affected. But I think what a lot of kind of Californians would feel probably disturbed about in the long-term perspective is that this will probably accelerate a move that's already been taking place for productions to take place outside of LA. And we are by no means out of the woods. I mean, the fires are still raging. I think the winds are kind of going up and down. And I think, unfortunately, the reality is that this is probably going to get worse, not just this particular fire, but we'll see other instances of this type. And climate change is going to impact production, entertainment all around the world, wherever we're going. And I think the fact that it hit right in LA itself, at the heart of the global entertainment industry, I think is very on point, but it perhaps is not surprising, unfortunately. So we'll see a lot more of this type of disruption.
And also, as we go past January the 20th, we're going to see how Mr. Trump would like to support or not Los Angeles and California too.
Yeah, I think he's what shall
I say? He's not a fan.
He's not a fan. Trump has started making noises about making federal aid dependent upon whether or not the people of that state voted for him. I think, well, first of all, that's illegal, unconstitutional, morally reprehensible.
That's a problem.
But, fine. We're past that, apparently. I think he also should give long and hard thought to whether he really wants to set up a world in which, all red states get abandoned. I mean, he doesn't care, let's be honest. But I think from a political perspective, we're creating a very dangerous system whereby we only look after the people who vote the way that we do. So fortunately, the Biden administration did not take that approach. We'll see whether Trump follows through on these kinds of threats.
I think I was reading somewhere he did get 6 million votes in California, so there were some people who would quite like him, but I guess they'd be disappointed had their house just burnt to the ground as well.
They probably are disappointed. We'll see.
But Rebecca, it's not just telly. Oscar nominations have been pushed back, it seems, and BAFTA has cancelled its annual tea party ahead of their film awards. Obviously, that's the most important thing. Is it going to affect awards season as well, do we think?
Yeah, I think so, because there is just a feeling of, as Karin was saying, there's a practical issue of, this is where the stuff happens and it's smouldering, or the air quality is so bad that it's kind of, there's plastic toxins in the air because they've all burned. So nobody can be outside anyway. And I think there's kind of this sense of, you need to get on your feet a certain level before you're going to feel like celebrating, right? It's going to feel a bit tasteless to be kind of going, what very expensive dress are you wearing, when quite a lot of the town you're in has, people have lost everything. But it is also having a kind of knock-on effect on the UK production sector as well. I've had a couple of conversations recently with UK producers because essentially, to make drama, as we were talking about, it's expensive to make drama, and the broadcasters in this country can't necessarily pay for it. So often you go out looking for co-productions from the American broadcasters and this American studio money. And of course, I've spoken to a couple of people who are just like, no one's picking up the phone, probably because the phone doesn't exist anymore. Who knows? And they're
other
busy.
Things to worry about.
Yeah, it's one of those times where truly, actually, this is not the most important thing in the world. Yeah. Which is true, of course it is. But then for kind of producers in the UK worrying about their business, they do have to care about that, even if they can understand the circumstances.
We're just talking about awards season and film more generally. I saw Timothée Chalamet arrive at the premiere in London on a Lime bike. Did you see this?
I missed this.
And 100% organic. There's no hashtag spawn in there. It's all organic. Quite a lot of Lime people's LinkedIn posts appeared on my feed this week, who are over the moon that Timothée Chalamet.
I mean, you can't buy that kind of publicity.
Has driven into shot. And I just think with you, Karin, and some of your PR head, I mean, that's just, you'd be so happy if you woke up to find that your bike had been inserted into the chat.
It's delightful, and then I think you have to you go through a process of having to calm everyone down because brands can actually fall on their face when they have those opportunities come on the spotlight. It's really important that if it's genuinely an organic moment, sometimes the worst thing that you can do is jump on it too aggressively, right? So be gracious, acknowledge the moment, etc. But you don't want to be caught out over egging it, or it starts to look a bit cringe, right? So don't lose the organic value that you've generated. But yeah, I'm sure there were many champagne toasts at Lime PR HQ, wherever that might be.
And the other one, actually, sort of, I guess, semi-connected to that world, back to the Traitors. They bought a single billboard above one of the cinemas in Leicester Square to make mention of one of the characters' acting ability. And again, that's a great sort of tactical bit of PR that generates a lot of social for just a single billboard push. Absolutely.
And to be honest, a lot of out of home is bought more for the purpose of then being able to put a picture of that billboard in the newspaper rather than it genuinely affecting audience. I love out-of-home advertising. It's great fun, but sometimes, quite often, one of the secrets of media buy is quite often they will buy billboards that are on the commute of the CEO, so that as he's driving along, he goes, "Oh, great! My media people have placed my billboards in all the places where people are seeing it." But it's just lining a route from his drive to work.
I think I once bought a load of tube ads at the tube station where the radio authority was based to plug some disastrous radio project to try and encourage them to.
Same principle.
Yeah. Okay, it was one of the prized local TV franchises during the Coalition era, but now London Live has ceased transmission. Karin, the local TV story has been a kind of complicated one, very conservative driven affair. Not a lot of these stations have particularly transformed the nature of the telly landscape, have they?
No, they haven't, actually. And it's interesting that people keep trying nevertheless, isn't it? So I think it's possible that London Live might be kind of bought out and brought back under perhaps a different branding or just a different ownership. So there may be life in the old girl yet. But I think, as a London dweller myself, I have flicked past London Live as a station. But honestly, there wasn't really content on there that was terribly compelling. And I actually think London might not be the best test bed for local news, because so much of the national news is London focused anyway, that I think they were really struggling to find an opportunity to differentiate. Whereas I think Scottish news, for example, Welsh news, there's a lot of uncovered stories. Having said that, I think Jim Watterson is doing some really good work, and he's really genuinely breaking stories with his new London venture.
Yeah, with London centric.
Absolutely, but again, that's a print it's a text publication, and really, good journalism, really smartly done. So I think local TV for London may not be as winning a proposition as you might think, especially since they've already got that. But there's definitely plenty of room to tell stories about and for London.
I mean, Jeremy Hunt would always say, there's 11 stations in Birmingham, Alabama, but no stations in Birmingham in the UK, and. He's right, and it's probably the way it should have been all along.
Yeah, I don't know. When I saw the story, I started thinking about, there's a really good article in the Royal Television Society's magazine about Rivals, the big Disney Plus show, which obviously is all about television franchises in the 80s. And the gist of this article was like, well, what would, how realistic is this? For people who do not remember that period, who are not working in the industry, how realistic is this? And people were saying, there was some true stuff. We were searching for bugs in the rooms. We're talking about franchises. But one of the quotes was they were talking about There's a scene in Rivals where they kind of have like a kind of televised pitch where they talk about why they should get the franchise. And so someone said, we had one of those, and actually the best thing somebody said there was, I want local TV and I want local issues, but I don't only want the local issues. I want to be part of the national conversation. And I kind of think that's where purely local TV channels fall down. Whereas I think like I love local news segments, or okay, we finished the national BBC news, now we're going to local news.
Well, but I mean, BBC local news is often the highest rated bit of television on all television every night. So there is a clear demand.
Yeah, and I think I want that access. I don't know that I want a whole channel of just London things, particularly, when there is online content, when I can make my own media online in the same way. I
mean, with London Live, so it was owned by Evening Standard, and it was sort of shutting down. There was talk, I think Sky News talked about the fact that David Montgomery sort of local TV network has acquired it. There hasn't really been any chat about that. I mean, we thought David Montgomery was sort of going to disappear after he lost sort of control of Local World. I mean, he loves a local angle.
Yes, he does, and I think TV loves a comeback story as well. I think, if we're honest.
Maybe not from him. Okay, join us in a few moments' time. We'll be back with more media stories.
Hello Media Club listeners, Patrick here from Podcast Discovery, the podcast marketing company, where this week we've been reflecting on how to get your podcast noticed by the people that matter in the media. Most critics like things to be kept simple. They like them in their inbox in plenty of time and with all of the details they need. Don't be afraid to be proud of your show. If you're not enthusiastic about it, why should they be? And always include your episodes, even if they're not quite ready yet. To find out more about what we can do for your podcast marketing, head to podcastdiscovery.com. That's podcastdiscovery.com.
In a moment, we'll be talking about how YouTube is dominating the news publishing space. But did you know that YouTube is also overtaking traditional podcast platforms as the top place for podcast listening? Surprising, right? Well, with over 2 billion active users, if you're thinking about starting a podcast, already have one, adding video can land you in front of a whole new audience, just like it has done for us. That's where Podshop comes in. With professional setup and expert support, Podshop makes it quick and easy to create high-quality video content. Plus, it looks pretty amazing. If you're watching me on YouTube right now, I think you'll agree. And for a limited time, enjoy 25% off your first booking at Podshop Studios with the code Media Club. Visit podshoponline.co.uk to book and take your podcast to the next level. And welcome back. Here's some stories that we've been talking about this week. There's just 2 days to go until TikTok has to shut down its app in the US. And so far, owner ByteDance has maintained it's going to do so. Rumours that everyone's favourite, Elon Musk, may step in to buy the company have not yet been substantiated. And if you're a budding podcaster looking for a big break, then look no further than the BBC Sounds Audio Lab, which is back for its 4th year. The programme financially supports 4 successful creators for 7 months, as well as providing professional guidance from some of the UK's best producers. And also 400 staff at the Washington Post have written to owner Jeff Bezos seeking a meeting. This follows the decision to prevent the paper endorsing a presidential candidate last year and its impact on subscriptions and trust in the paper. Karin and Rebecca are still with me. The TikTok story is an interesting one. Are we going to see the end of TikTok, or it's kind of a last-minute reprieve?
It's really fascinating, and it could almost jump in any direction. There's a Supreme Court case that was being heard this week. The readout from that is that the justices do not look like they're going to rule in TikTok's favour. That the legislation was correctly passed, bipartisan. So I think that's probably put to one side. Yes,
because Republicans were very much forced banning TikTok before the boss waded in.
Bizarrely, it was the one thing everybody seemed to agree on in Congress. It's hilarious, though, because the whole argument is that TikTok is Chinese owned and therefore represents a national security threat, whether you buy that or not. But now with TikTok being under threat, we're now seeing another Chinese-owned social media platform kind of getting lots of downloads. It's now the number one in the app downloads. So I'm not sure Congress is solving the problem it thinks it's solving.
There were some lovely stories about, is it Red Letter? I can't remember the thing. And the Chinese interactions with the Americans as they're sort of talking to each other. And someone was saying, like, actually, this is sort of what both countries don't want, which is the humans, the public, talking to each other and finding connections together.
Well, it's hilarious because TikTok is banned in China. So, they definitely don't want an open public debate of that kind. ByteDance say they won't sell as they've been, they could solve this tomorrow by selling out to a non-Chinese owned entity. They say they won't do that. They say they can't under Chinese law. So how it's going to be resolved is unclear. But right now, ByteDance's position is that they will take the app down. A lot of people had said, well, the law would only require them to stop updating the app so people could maybe keep using their TikTok. But actually, ByteDance's position is, no, if we're banned, we will take down the app and there will be a firestorm.
And there's also some questions for Apple and Google about whether they should still list the app as well and whether they'll take it down themselves. Yeah. But then we hear, Rebecca, that the CEO of ByteDance is going to be at Trump's inauguration.
Yes, indeed. It's a very strange one. I mean, all of those hearings. So when the congressional hearings about are we going to ban it or not, there was some of the stupidest conversations I've ever seen televised. There was kind of one where kind of the representative was sort of saying, well, how does it know your birthday? That's creepy. And the kind of tech guy had to say, well, because you tell it your birthday when you sign up. That's part of the age verification thing. And I don't know, that's creepy. And it's that kind of a very tech literate generation hitting a not so tech literate generation. And I think that obscures where there may be genuine security issues around it. I mean, I'm on TikTok. I love it. But yeah, I'm sure, there are a lot of people who are very concerned about it. So.
I mean, Trump was very much, why would I ban it? I'm doing really well on it. That's his analysis of the situation.
That is his lens on everything, isn't it? But he's been back and forth on this. During his last presidency, he was all for banning TikTok. So at that time he was for it, then he's against it, then he's for it. I think it's whatever he feels like at the moment. So I wouldn't necessarily look to him for any kind of stable position. But, the people who want to influence Trump know how to do that. So whoever he's met with last is the person he's likely to wind up favouring. So the fact that ByteDance wants to be at the inauguration is not surprising.
I mean, it's going to be a strange view on the dais because you've got his prospective cabinet and then the tech bro CEOs.
Yep. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, they'll all be there on the dais. So a lot of money up there.
Yes, and oligarchy, techno-oligarchy.
I constantly feel like we've slipped into the alternative timeline and dystopia and someone's going to appear and go, see, this is what it could be like if you kill that butterfly and then vanish. And we're just going to be like, oh, hi.
It all went wrong when they turned on the Super Collider. That's all I'm saying. That's what happened. And speaking of other platforms, YouTube... Press Gazette has revealed the biggest news brands on YouTube, with Vice taking the top spot and the BBC coming in a respectable fourth. Interesting how many started kind of 20 years ago. Even Vice sort of doing very well. I mean, it's hard to kind of break into this top list, isn't it?
It is an interesting list, and it's interesting as well to look at how the media platforms compare to individuals. And actually, a lot of individual media personalities have much higher media platforms than even some of the media entities that they currently are used to work for. And as you say, a lot of them are legacy media, and they've done a lot. I think the list is interesting as well, though, the way it's constructed, because it's based on subscribers, and then you look again at kind of views, and actually. Subscriber behavior just shows a lot more dedication, but it may or may not translate into actual viewership in any numbers. And so some of the publications, some of the media entities that are achieving the most views are quite different than the ones that are achieving the most subscribers. And actually, you can see a real political slant to the right in the the high subscriber media entities. But if you look at the numbers by views, actually, then you get MSNBC and some of the more left-leaning ones coming in. So
things that people are very passionate about getting that.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that kind of hyper intense partisanship on the right, and then perhaps more media consumption but less loyalty on the left, which is a sign of our times.
Yeah, I mean, it's also interesting, Rebecca, that Piers Morgan doing pretty well actually with his TV show with his show. This last week it was announced that he's taken that in house from News UK. People sort of took the mick a bit out of him, sort of on a slippery slope. I think it's a pretty good thing he's done and managed to get control of.
Yeah, and I think there is something about one of the discussions within the TV industry is how can we get YouTube stars to want to be, on our TV shows. And actually, a bunch of them don't, because they're like, I'm my own boss. I get the money, anyway. I have this massive reach. I don't need to be on TV. And it's interesting that you've now got people coming from that legacy media, that traditional media, going, maybe that's the thing to do. Maybe I want to be on a YouTube show. And I mean, also, I've been spending a lot of time with an older relative in the last sort of few months, and his eyesight's going a little bit, so he can't read as much as he used to. And he watches so much YouTube. Yeah. And he just flicks through, because he loves a documentary, he loves a factual thing. He'll watch the TV news, and then he will go on YouTube and watch he's got it set up on his TV. And he just keeps telling me, this is the most amazing adventure ever. And I was like, I always associate YouTube with, very young sort of teenagers, early 20s. And I was like, okay, there may well be a silver market for YouTube.
Had you detected any algorithm within that?
He does have an interest in history, and of course it starts pointing you towards mid-century history, and then you come on and you're like, this show about immigration, I would balance it out with something else, if that's all right. We're gonna watch something else now.
My 11-year-old daughter is also watching a lot of YouTube, so it just goes to show YouTube is at either end of the age spectrum. And so she's watching a lot of YouTube, and since she was very young, she's able to do a terrifyingly accurate imitation of YouTube voice, like smash that subscribe button. It's horrifying.
My nephew, if we're around like a dinner table and he wants to get everyone's attention, he always goes, hey guys. And it's like, oh God, YouTube infection noticed. Well, go and check out the Press Gazette. Has a good list, breaks it down to lots of different categories, as we've talked about there. Okay, time for the media quiz. Let's see how much you've been paying attention to the media news this week. And this week's is entitled Launch Time. Jeff Bezos may be the first newspaper proprietor to launch a rocket into space, but that hasn't stopped other media companies from announcing their own launches this week. But can you tell me what they launched? Tenuous, I know, but it's best of three. Buzz in if you know the answer. Your name's your buzzers. So Rebecca, you will say
Rebecca.
And Karen, you will say
Karen.
Let's play Launch Time. Okay, question number one. Who will be hosting the New Look Match of the Day?
Karen.
Yes.
Three presenters,
Correct.
one of whom is Gabby Logan.
Yes.
Do I have to say the other two?
Can you remember the other two?
I can.
I can tag team in if that helps. Yes. Mark Chapman and Kelly Cates.
Yeah, them.
Yes.
Yes, them.
Yes, they are the three. Do we think good choices?
Yeah, I think so. I think, Match of the Day has been synonymous with Gary Lineker for so long. I think it's just going to be really interesting. And I think you weren't going to get one person to replace that kind of figure. So to have people that are able to bounce off each other, I think that's a really smart choice.
Gabby Logan and Mark Chapman already host the sports agents for Global. I mean, that's kind of interesting. Sort of, it's a good thing. It's a bad thing. Would you be happy if you're at Global Towers that your big stars are now hosting Match of the Day?
If I were Global, I'd be very happy. I think from their point of view, it's all win, right? They've already got the talent. The talent can now bring new people in. So I think it's a pretty sweet deal for them. I think it's nice that I don't see necessarily a problem with it, but I think there is something really interesting about building two competing media enterprises with the same sets of talent. But it's not such a new thing. People have always had portfolio careers in media, so I don't have a problem with it.
Rebecca, also a lot of talk of sort of format shifts for Match of the Day, and this is across Match of the Day and Match of the Day 2, and probably some social as well. It'll all be kind of covering all of it. I mean, is it sort of a football content universe?
Yeah, I think so. I think, again, it's a show that's been around for a long time. This is a good opportunity to have a shake-up, to think about, okay, who's watching when? Are people watching on catch-up? Are they watching live? Are they watching Match of the Day 2? Are they, are they watching online on social media clippings? I think that's all very sensible.
Yeah. Okay, question number 2. What is LDD News Limited launching in London?
Rebecca,
yes. This
is essentially, it's the Evening Standard print edition. It's not the Evening Standard print edition, but it's basically the Evening Standard print edition.
So a daily newspaper.
Yes.
Called?
The London Daily News?
Close. I think it's London Daily Digital.
London Daily Digital, but it's paper.
I think there's a bit of print and a lot of digital.
Yeah, so there was monthly print and then daily digital.
Yes.
And I believe a 60-strong newsroom, which is very positive.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good, strong
Love to see
newsroom.
it.
That's, yeah.
I mean, do you know much about the people behind it?
Not really, no.
So I think they're people who've done some Asian publications. There's a prototype you can go and have a look at. Sort of leans very much into the more good news end, lots of sort of council press release converted content. I mean, it's difficult to establish something of quality in this space.
It is. I think I want to be optimistic about this, right? I really want to be optimistic because I feel like I joined the journalism industry as everyone was starting to go, oh no, we don't actually know how to make the internet pay, and there's no money anymore. Sorry, guys. And
but the parties used to be great.
Yeah, the party. Oh, I hear all the stories. Yeah. But like, I kind of think there is. But you want to believe very much that we are always going to need reliable news stories and local news stories, and obviously that's, as you said, that's what Jim Waterson's trying to do and is doing very well. And I think I want to believe that this is kind of that we've hit the nadir and we're on our way up to find a balance of actually we do need some of this stuff because, you know, there is all this stuff about misinformation online, of influencers being people's major news sources. Somehow we've got to redress that balance, and I want to believe that this might be, it's never going to be the kind of the license to print money that it used to be back in the day owning a media company, but I want to believe that, okay, maybe this is the start of something. Maybe that's horribly naive, but like,
Karin, it's not going to be journalism, it's going to be good, honest.
I mean, I hope so.
Yeah.
I like Rebecca. I'm very hopeful. I always like to see local news kind of finding its path. I also was reflecting on the fact that one of the problems that a lot of people, the predictions are that everyone's going to get their news from AI. Well, AI can't generate. Can't generate news. All it can do is predict from the basis of what's been inputted. And one of the real challenges that AI companies have is that they don't have enough good data. And over the course of time, as more and more sources become AI influenced, they're just feeding on each other. So bad data is produced by AIs that feed into other AIs. So I guess that's just a long-winded way of saying actually original local news content creation, I think, would be really valuable, not only for the people consuming it in the first instance, but actually building a better data set and a better kind of set of information for our future robot overlords to use to.
Well, there was a great story this week about Grok, the X AI, and it uses Twitter as part of its data set, which makes it like a quick to respond AI apparently, and it was generating some inaccuracies which people were talking about on Twitter, but then Grok was reading that and it therefore reaffirmed its initial incorrect views.
I mean, can I just say I no longer use Twitter, but even back when I used Twitter, I tried out Grok. Don't use it, guys. It's really not a good product. I mean, even in the realm of AI, it's as you might expect, because Twitter itself, its information is kind of only reliable in the aggregate, right? Like in the scheme of things, you sometimes get the misinformation being corrected, but Grok is just producing very poor quality product at the moment.
I do think, like, you know how people joke about, oh, if we had the Olympics and we had some people who are doping, and we'll see how well they do, and then we'll have the normal Olympics as well. Like, I kind of feel like, I'll have my normal reliable news sources, and then maybe a daily news source of what AI thinks is happening today. It could be quite interesting as long as it's very labelled as like, this isn't happening, guys.
A very made up one. I mean, it's interesting on X, the inserting lots of Grok at every point of it. You can get it to I got it to look at my profile as a button appeared saying get a description. And obviously it can read all my tweets, which there have been a number over the years, and obviously it had what I had in my bio, and so it was half right and then half inserted another person that was called Matt. It wasn't even like a Matt Deegan. Was
it Matt Hill?
No, sadly it wasn't even Matt Hill. I would have minded a collaboration with producer Matt, but yeah, I mean there's a lot of dodginess.
I mean, more and more I think that the main thing is AI is not designed to be reliable. It's not designed to be an information source, and I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding of how it's being used, including by a lot of media enterprises, of assuming that its purpose is information. Its purpose is not information. Its purpose is generation. And if you're trying to kind of ideate to get to something quickly, it can be very powerful for that. But if you want to base your ideation on known facts, it's not a good starting point. fundamentally. I don't know why I let us deviate into it. Sorry about that.
I would also just add that grok is a terrible name. It just, when you were saying, a load of grok, I was like, it sounds like cack or something. Why? A man can't name anything, can he?
No. Right, question number 3. What is the BBC launching on Monday, the 27th of January? It's on the wireless.
Rebecca.
Yes.
This is the Scott Mills Radio 2 show.
Yes.
Yes.
So a new Radio 2 schedule, which includes the Scott Mills Breakfast Show. Quite a swift rise for Scott on Radio 2. He took over Steve Wright's slot. He got quite a lot of grief for that. I mean, anybody who probably took over Steve Wright's slot was going to get a lot of grief. But he's now off to breakfast. A good place for him to be?
Yeah, I think so. I think, breakfast radio is one of those that still does have quite a good following because people are listening to it on their way to work. And like you say, it does inspire a lot of loyalty, right?
Yes.
So if you can get in there and you can do well, you are going to get that loyalty. You are going to be the voice that kind of people kick off their morning with. So, yeah.
I mean, Karin, if he does a good job of it, I mean, he could do it for 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, that tends to be how it goes, doesn't it? Because people who are in that slot are so iconic. They're so much a part of people's daily lives. Once you're in, I think Zoe Ball had that slot before. And I think Scott has said that this was his dream. This was the aspiration, what you want. So, I think assuming that he settles in well and that, the show goes really well, I think, he'll be a part of people's daily lives for a long time to come. And I think that's great. I think people still really look to that sense of comfort and sense of kind of the parasocial relationship that we have with people, especially in a sensitive time like your commute.
Yes. Well, good luck to Scott. Right. That makes Rebecca our winner, I think, just trying to do numbers in my head. You get to provide Grok with more information about the show to get us to come up with some better answers. If you can do that for next time, that'd be great. Thank you to Karin and Rebecca for joining us. Rebecca, how can people keep up with your good work?
You can find me on the broadcast website, broadcastnow.co.uk. Quick plug, we are running the indie survey. So if you run a production company in the television industry, please fill in our indie survey. It's like one of the biggest things we do. And we need the data. People come to us to find out what's going on as an overview of the sector and that they're not the only ones struggling or they're not the only ones experiencing particular things. Please come and give us your data.
That's good. And Karin?
So you can find my Twitterings now on Blue Sky. Find me at Karin JR on Blue Sky. That's KARIN JR.
Excellent. And you can find the Media Club there as well. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for joining us as well. If you want to follow us, you can. All of the links are on our website at themediaclub.com. And why not go there and give us your email address? You get a note from us every week, but also it's really good for us to know who you are, where you are, who you work for. And when we talk about the show, we can talk about this great audience that we have. So just go to themediaclub.com. My name's Matt Deegan. The producer was Matt Hill. It was a Rethink audio production with video support from Podcast Discovery. And I'll see you next week.